Chris, thank you so much for being willing to share a little bit about your experience. Can you talk a little bit about your work at Alluma and the impetus for your efforts around class and even health equity broadly, if that's easier?
Primarily what I do here at Alluma is I started as a mental health professional. I still do that. It's about 60% of my time is serving people with complex and chronic trauma. And then the other 40% of my time is I get to do equity work. And so that really came out of a trauma-informed care movement that we had here at Alluma about 7 years ago. And that really evolved, and they're interdependent, equity and trauma work. As a community mental health center, that's probably one of the biggest components for most people that walk through our doors, if not the central one. As a social worker, for me, the intention is the individual intervention, the meso intervention, which is what are the policies and procedures of Alluma, and then the macro practice, what's happening in our community, what's happening at our state level, what's happening at our federal level. So for me, it's all layers that need to be moving together if equity is really going to be achieved.
What's been the most rewarding or enjoyable part of it?
To me, I think probably the biggest compliment is when someone refers you, either as an individual or as an agency, to someone they care about. I think there's a historical amount of distrust for good reason for our type of jobs, right? Whether you talk about social work jobs or you talk about mental health work, we've got a dark history and we need to be honest about that. We have not done right by people, especially people in marginalized communities. And so part of this work is just good relationship building and being accountable and working to repair what we've broken. And when we can do that, then we can start building relationship. And it's not until further down the road that we talk about, all right, what does this mean on your end? It's more about how do I make this right first and build this relationship. And then we can talk about what next steps are. Kind of the message that I've tried to bring to Alluma is all of this is independent and interdependent. So we have our independent roles as individuals at Alluma and as an agency to do our own work. How are we showing up? How are we being self-aware about that? And how are we fixing the spots that we need to fix individually? And then when we do that, that collectively creates a movement in the right direction.
One of the things that when you're talking about relationships that I think about a lot is how we can be so afraid to really try much in this space because we're, especially as white-bodied people, afraid we're going to mess up. We're going to do something wrong. What's your kind of response or advice to somebody who is feeling that way?
Yeah, well, I think one, that's a good thing because it helps us be self-aware, right? We don't want to be a bull in a china shop just crashing in and trying whatever. On the other hand, I think we can get paralyzed by fear if we're unwilling to take some calculated risks and be vulnerable ourselves and really own the amount of power that we carry into each space. And just speaking to that white-bodied piece that you are, I think that's really important for people that want to do well and do the right thing. So yeah, I think that paralysis can be a real deal. And so being honest with yourself about where do I need to grow? And being honest too about, I'm not going to do this perfectly. So how do I lean into some discomfort?
Right. Knowing, and I assume that if there's a misstep or along the way, which there probably is bound to be, repair can happen.
You bet.
Yeah.
That's part of the trauma-informed care training that I provide here is that conversation around being good at repair is probably one of the most important relationship components for any individual, whether you're a parent or a partner or a child of someone else. Getting good at repair is just...
What has been the most challenging part of the work and how have you managed that or addressed it?
Yeah, I think I'll just speak personally. I think probably the most challenging piece is that dynamic tension between we need to allow this space to breathe and to grow and to take the right time it needs to do that, while also acknowledging that for folks in that community, it needed to be done 200 years ago. Right. So for me, the most challenging thing is to not push the system faster than it can go, because that will actually cause setbacks and make it take longer. So for me, the most challenging is the system and its fitness and its ability to move faster has been very frustrating for me.
How do you sense or know how fast to go, or that it's too fast, or that something's at risk, or it's fragile, or on the converse, that it's strong enough to take this?
I think in one level, it's taking the structure that a toolkit can give you. At the same level, it's being embedded enough to have your finger on the pulse of your community. Mm. So I've been at Alluma, it'll be 18 years in January, and I was born and raised in this part of the world. And so I've kind of been in it my whole life. And so I have an idea of what folks are like and what they're thinking about and what they're feeling in different ways. And so the combination of a toolkit plus being embedded in your community and having relationships that are similar but also diverse can really help you get a feel for what's the right pacing for what I'm attempting to do. And I think those relationships also provide grace. So for the folks that are like, move faster, I can, since we've got a relationship built, I can say, hey, this is what we're up to. All right, where do you want to participate? And for the folks that are like, whoa, this is uncomfortable, I can be like, I know you. This stretch will be okay. Let's give it a shot. So I think that's where we can also have some wiggle room.
So if you could go back in time, you have a time machine back to 7 years ago, when you started some of the more intensive health equity work at Alluma, what advice would you give yourself?
I'd say, you know what, my boy, it's uncomfortable and some people are looking at you with kind of a side eye, but it's the right way to go. Keep trusting yourself and keep trusting your partners. When you see someone that probably wouldn't have walked through your doors 7 years ago, get what they deserve and what they need, can't put a dollar amount on that. And that's the stuff. It's not the big hurrahs. It's the little things that you see that we're missing that you didn't know. Well, you know, as a white-bodied person, I wasn't knowing was missing per se, right? Or wasn't even aware to the extent it was missing. But when you see it and you're like, wow, that's been missing, it's really clear now.
Well, anything else that I didn't ask about or we didn't touch on that you were hoping to share as part of this?
I'd come back to that relationship piece again, and that, you know, find people. I've done so much bushwhacking in my life. You don't need to do that. Find someone who's done some of it. You don't have to reinvent the wheel, and you don't have to do it by yourself. There's folks out there that want to be there with you.